the better I got at mindset work, the harder I got at helping myself. And why I say that is because I'm so good at high functioning, especially like now that I'm a coach. Like I know how to bullshit myself better than anybody. I know I'm also like an Enneagram too. So like pride and like self-awareness, I tend to think I'm very self-aware because I'm so good at hiding my shit from myself. I'm so good at sweeping it under this rug of everything's good and grateful, and I'm just going to sweep it under the rug and sweep it under the rug. And like that works. And what's crazy is like, I think I was experiencing high level burnout, but I couldn't have even told you that because on the outside, things still look so good that even I was convinced I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm good. I've got this. But what was crazy is I started seeing women around me saying, if I don't change something, something's going to blow up.
On today's episode, I am over the moon to have Becca Dollard here. Becca is a somatic healing practitioner and a holistic life coach, and she works primarily with highly ambitious and high-functioning women in the season of raising babies and raising businesses. And Becca, I'm so excited you're here. Thank you so much for your time today.
I am so excited to connect again. I just had you on my podcast. We had such a fun conversation. So I am so excited about it.
It's going to be so good. And we were just talking about this even before we hit record today, just this idea of somatic healing. And what is it? Like, how can we start to get educated about how it can be a powerful practice for us in our wellness, in our health, in our life? And so, Becca, I'd love for you to maybe just start with your own journey. How did you get into this idea of somatic healing and going down the road of doing that in your own life? And why did you feel like it was something you wanted to explore personally?
Yeah. So it's interesting. My journey professionally with somatics is definitely, parallel to my personal one. But I would say like my journey to somatics started before I ever had language for what it was, for what was happening in my body. One of the first things that comes to mind is that when my daughter was born, her birth was pretty profound in that it brought me into my body. I was very highly dissociated. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't have the language for the CPTSD symptoms of like, I was there, but I wasn't there. I had a lot of freeze, a lot of fawn stuck in my body. I had experienced a lot of trauma at a very young age, and I had done therapy for it. And, I graduated, I got married, I went to hair school, and then we had this baby. And I kind of thought like, oh, I've hit like what I've always wanted. I became a mom very, very young, but I remember in that like post-birth season, I could feel things. And it was very overwhelming for me. I started having a lot of trauma things come up, and I was really frustrated. I was heartbroken because I was just like, leave me alone. Like this trauma happened in childhood. Like, why is it still bothering me? Why do I feel like, there was a lot of stuff coming up in my sex life at the time. There was all of these things where I was going like, what is happening with me? What is wrong with me? I've done the therapy. I've talked about what's wrong. I know what's broken.
Yeah.
But I hit this season where I was like, what is wrong with me? But what's interesting, when my son was born, his birth profoundly healed me because I felt so much sensation in my body, but I wasn't afraid of it. I realized how much capacity I had to be massively uncomfortable, to be terrified, to feel, when you've had your babies naturally, like, like it is intense. But that was one of the first times in my life where all of a sudden I didn't underestimate myself. And that set off like a weird chain of events in that season. Once I was like postpartum and starting to work out, I actually started doing kickboxing workouts in my home. And every time I would do it, by the end, I was breaking down in tears. And I was having these responses happening in my heart and in my gut and in my pelvis. And in that season, a lot of things started to heal and transform. And I was doing life coaching at the time as well. Like for me, I was receiving life coaching. And it was so fascinating because I remember being like, something's changing in me, but I don't have language for it. And it wouldn't be until years and years later. I was already a life coach at this point. I had already been helping people with a lot of like the mental health stuff, right? Your stereotypical like mental coaching on mindset and mindset blocks and beliefs and how to change your thinking patterns and habits and, all those personal growth things. I had been involved in that role for a long time, both personally and professionally. And then I had read The Body Keeps the Score, which I have to laugh about that book because I actually don't recommend it to people. It's like the most widely known somatic book. It is highly traumatizing.
Oh my goodness.
um and honestly, like it can't, I don't think you can capture somatics in a book. I just don't think it's possible. It's too flat. But I finally finished that book, and I remember while I was reading it, it took me forever to read it. It was really hard. It's just not my favorite. But there was something in me that said, what is this somatics thing? Because I finally had this language for understanding my mental health wasn't just in my head. It was not just in my mind. It was not just in my thoughts. It was happening in my body.
Yeah.
That was the powerful thing that I got from that book. And so I went on this exploration personally. I did some somatic courses, and all of a sudden I was just like, this is it. And all of a sudden I had this language for understanding, the fight and the flight and the freeze and the fawn. And I started understanding, oh, when I'm having anxiety and it's happening in my chest, what are the sensations of it? How does that energy want to move? And when I tell you, I started having all of this language and tools and capacity that, like, I didn't even know, like, this deep exploration of self. And, I especially think of, like, in my marriage, we were, we love, my husband and I, we love each other. We really like each other. But every time we were fighting, it was like, I feel like we're great at communication, but, like, it doesn't matter how well you're communicating if both of you are in these, like, paralyzed states, or, like, both of us have very different conflict styles. And somatics was giving me language and tools for understanding when I get triggered, I move at things with, like, a fawning, hugging, let me make this better. And when my husband's triggered, he comes at things with a fist, not literally, not like actually, but he comes at things with, like, an intensity and, like, a pushing away a little bit. And so here we were, both of us mad at each other. And so I love somatics because that's what it brought me in my life. And that was kind of my personal journey. And then I went on to get certified professionally.
Yeah.
I went and did the Embody Lab course. It was phenomenal. I highly recommend it. I worked with Luis Mojica for a long time. My one-on-one coach who I work with, she does a lot of really cool somatic stuff. And it was so powerful. And then I started to bring it into my coaching with women. And I was like, this is it. Because I work with these high functioners who, like, we've done therapy, we've done coaching. Like, you read a personal growth book and you're like, I've heard this before. I've done this. Like, I get this. Somatics was that, like, oh, there's this deeper level of understanding myself and the world and life. So that's kind of my personal journey. Do you want me to jump into, like, what somatics is? And
let's do that. I want to ask a couple questions, because you touched on so many really profound things that all of us experience in some capacity, right? We're all on different journeys, and we all have different paths, and we all have different experiences. But, like, the feelings and your story are so relatable in the sense of, like, trying to really get in touch with yourself and trying to really almost feel your feelings is essentially what a lot of what you were describing. So I'm just curious, like, when you were in that season of trying to really figure out, I know that my body is changing. I know that I'm feeling, like, mental health symptoms, so to speak, inside of my entire body. Like, what were the things that started to lead you into even exploring somatics? Did somebody talk to you about it? Were you introduced to it in some way? Or did you just kind of fall upon it because you knew innately you were changing and you wanted to uncover that depth?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if one, it's probably just a facet of my personality. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm also a teacher. So anything I want to learn about, I have to go and teach it. Like, it's just me. It's just innate in who I am. Also could be, like, the ADHD hyperfixation of, like, once I find something that I like, I'm like, I want to know everything about this. And like, I think I've been doing somatic work professionally for, like, 2-3 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm still like, wait, deeper, more advanced, more language. But for me, it was really interesting because I think what I started to notice in myself and in my clients, and I'm so grateful that I started to learn somatics while I was already working with these other women, and I got to see how it impacted them. Because what I started to realize, therapy is a really, really great tool to get you to baseline health, especially when you think of, like, your stereotypical therapy, right? There's lots of different branches of therapy. There's lots of different therapists. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. But a lot of what people use therapy for is when they're in crisis or when they've
Yeah.
had chronic long-term issues and they need to get back to a baseline of health.
Yeah.
So like, let's say you've broken a bone, you need to go see a doctor who can set that bone, who can put it in a cast or who can do surgery if necessary. But once you get to like that baseline of health, if you go to that surgeon isn't going to be the person who helps you mobilize
Yeah.
that arm. They're not going to be able to do what like a physical therapist or a like personal trainer can do, who's saying, okay, let's talk about range of motion.
Yeah.
Let's talk about strengthening. Let's talk about staying power. Let's talk about how you bounce back when you have an injury. Let's talk about how you prevent injuries. That's something that I think our culture has gotten so wrong about mental health, is that we're only addressing these chronic diseases versus saying, how do we improve mental, emotional, relational well-being before they get that bad?
Yeah.
And once they're good, how do we make them even more robust? How do we start dialing it in of like, how much better can it get? Because I know in my life, therapy in the personal growth world, it got me to this certain level of baseline health. But then I started saying, okay, this is great, but like my good isn't good enough. And
Yeah.
that didn't come from a shame. That came from like I want my marriage to not just survive this season. I want it to thrive. And like the tools that I have aren't going deep enough. So I think for me, I started to notice that those stereotypical mental health tools, they only addressed getting me to functioning. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, in my personal life, I went from very under functioning, very depressed, very like like I think of like I had postpartum depression of like baseline things were impossibly hard. But then I went to the other side where everything on the outside looked really good,
Yeah.
including to me. I was good. I was grateful. I had this life that I had always dreamed of, but I had all of these things going on internally. And every once in a while, someone would like accidentally poke that, like, you know, an Instant Pot, when
Yeah.
you like poke the thing, all of a sudden I was like, there's these things seeping out sideways, because I was working with intellectualizing. I was
Yep.
working with the story. I was working with the like quote unquote mindset and beliefs. And I was doing it as hard as I could, right? Like I
Right.
literally made it
Right.
my profession. I was that dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but there was this low level disassociation. There was this
Mm.
like, I'm going through all of the motions, but I don't feel all the way here. I
Yeah.
like when I'm with my kids, I don't fully feel it. Like I feel like I'm missing it. And what was crazy is like on the outside, I would look at my behaviors and I'm like, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm showing up pretty good, but I had this like low level understanding of like, I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I'm not all the way here. And that's kind of hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, but there was this low level disassociation. I felt like I was in this fog. And once the better I got at mindset work, the harder I got at helping myself. And why
Yeah.
I say that is because I'm so good at high functioning, especially like now that I'm a coach. Like
Yeah.
I know how to bullshit myself better than
Yep.
anybody. I
Yep.
know like I'm also like an Enneagram too. So like pride and like self-awareness, I tend to think I'm very self-aware because I'm so good at hiding my shit from myself.
Yeah.
I'm so good at sweeping it under this rug of everything's good and grateful. And I'm just going to sweep it under the rug and sweep it under the rug. And like that works. And what's crazy is like, I think I was experiencing high level burnout, but I couldn't have even told you that because on the outside, things still look so good that even I was convinced I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm good. I've got this. But what was crazy is I started seeing women around me saying, if I don't change something, something's going to blow up. It's
Yeah.
going to be internal or it's going to be external. And I started seeing these women that I was working with and coaching. And this was when I had started doing somatic work in my life. And all of a sudden I started to realize I had been healing that low level burnout of mentally, I was doing pretty good, but like emotionally and in my body, I truly had these deep stuck embodiments. Like I can think of, you know, even just this last year, Erin, I was working with some like really deep freeze stuff that
Yeah.
started thawing. And when I tell you, like, it was terrifying for me because I was just like, I don't have time
Yeah.
to be in a deep season of grief about shit that happened in my
Yeah.
childhood.
Yeah.
And I've done this work. I shouldn't have to do this. And it's like, unfortunately, I'm a human and I have this animal body that remembers.
Yep.
It remembers that like it's actually not safe. There was this deep part of me that was like, I can't let them see me.
Yeah.
There's something deeply dangerous about it. And it wasn't cognitive, it wasn't in my head, but I was starting to experience these really big emotions. And I'm so, so grateful for all the work that I've done because I had capacity to move through it.
Yeah.
I had tools to navigate and work with what does it look like to be in health when I feel raw
Yeah.
and like I'm a live wire, because like I'm already a highly sensitive person. I'm already highly emotional. And then all of a sudden I have these big, deep things coming up in my heart and my gut that like, I'm 33, I'm 34 now. I had this like, how is this affecting me still so much? And I
Right.
think that's what's hard with high functioners is we tend to just sweep it under this rug of like, I'm good, I'm grateful, that's in the past, like I'm fine. And I think therapy misses those people.
Yeah.
I think somatics is where we start to say things look good, but how do they feel? Because I've seen this personally where there's these people whose lives look so good and then all of a sudden they're divorced or all of
Yeah.
a sudden they burn their business down. And it's like, I don't want that to happen to me. And I don't
Right.
want it to happen to my clients, but we can't just work with how things look. We have to work with how they feel. We can't just work with your cognitive mental thinking because like you are not just who was it? I think it was Mark Walsh who was saying like your body is not just this meat puppet.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are walking around over intellectualizing themselves and they've used mindset as a way to like puppeteer their bodies and their
Yeah.
souls.
So good.
Because but where does your connection lie? It's in your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Where is your pleasure? It's in your body. Where is your relationship to other people? It's in your body. It's not just in your head. Where is anxiety? Where is low level depression? Where is grief? Where is joy? All of those things aren't just happening in your head.
Yeah.
They're happening in your body, but our culture didn't give us any tools for working with the body.
Right. So true. And you're like just speaking straight into my soul right now, like straight into my heart, because I've experienced a level of this in my own life. And I'm really in this season still where I'm trying to figure out how am I unpacking the levels of the therapies and the mental health and the more intellectualizing that I've done and learning how to get more into my body and get more aware of how I'm actually truly feeling and how I'm really showing up in my day-to-day life. And I think that a lot of women can really relate to this because we get into these autopilot modes for our life, for motherhood, for our jobs, for our marriages. And all of a sudden, like you said, you just are totally disassociated and you can't even find the language to figure out why or how or what the next step forward is. So Becca, I'd love for you, before we kind of really talk about what is somatic healing exactly and how do you really start to dive into that as a practice, talk a little bit more about disassociation. Like I really want women who listen to this episode today to understand what does that really truly mean and how can you start to identify it in your own body?
Well, I think there's a lot of different levels or ways people will describe dissociation. So the reason I have started to use that word is I think there's a lot of women who are the best way to describe it is that it feels like you're going through the motions,
Yeah.
but you're cut off from sensation. And for a lot of women, what will happen is they go through life kind of cut off from the sensation because they're moving so fast. Like they're moving so fast that their emotions can't keep up with them. So there's a lot of repression going on. There's a lot of like, I don't have time for this. I don't have energy for this, right? Like when you're driving in the car and your toddler's screaming, like that's not a great time to like break down in grief and cry, right? There's not a lot of room. And there's a reality to that, especially for mothers, especially for like high functioning women who are doing a lot of things. There's not a lot of convenient time and space for us to be human.
Yeah.
And we have to start with that because like there is a very real cultural issue going on that like our lives are moving so fast that we have forgotten our basic humanities. We have forgotten like some of our most basic physiological needs, but like our physiological is deeply connected with our emotional, spiritual, relational well-being.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about disassociation, it's you're living from the neck up.
Yep.
You're going through the motions, but you're not there. One of the stories I tell is like you're thinking all about like how to make Christmas morning special. Like you're doing all of this planning and creating and making it special for everyone else, but you sit there that morning drinking your coffee and not one part of you can feel that magic.
Yeah.
Not one part of, like, you're in the room but you're not in the room. And some people will describe it as, I feel like I'm just like floating above my life. I feel like I'm just watching my life. And here's the thing. One of my like profound beliefs personally and professionally is that like this isn't actually an issue. And why, and let me explain that. There's a really good reason why you're dissociated. There's a real big wisdom in your body that you are dissociated. There's a reason why my body disassociated when I had sexual trauma happening before I could even talk. There's a reason why my body said, I need to not feel what's happening to my body.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. The body is so, so wise. But all humans, I really think the more that I learn about trauma and recovery from trauma and post-traumatic growth, and by the way, it's important to say, like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not someone who works with like, let's go dig up that deep trauma. I work with like, once we're at baseline health, but it's important to say that like, I think most human traumas are very complex.
Yeah.
Like, I remember in high school science, they teach you like, oh, fight and flight, right? Maybe you got that freeze. There's a bear. What does your body do? What they didn't talk about is that your kids are going to be playing someday, and that overstimulation you're going to feel, which could be coming from a million different things, by the way, depending on who you are. It could be your parents always yelled at you when you were loud. It could be you weren't allowed to be seen and heard as a kid. It could be you had an explosive mom who lost her shit on you if you overwhelmed her and overstimulated her. So now you're this 33-year-old mom and your kids are playing, but you're not logically thinking, I want to yell at my kids. Your body does it for you.
Yeah.
Your body says, this is not safe. This is not okay. We need this to stop. So we're having these responses of over or under responding to what's happening in the present moment. And why I bring that into the disassociation is like, disassociation is a really helpful coping mechanism.
Yeah.
That is nervous system regulation, is when your body does things unconsciously to protect you from things that you don't think you have capacity for.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about disassociation, like that can be a really helpful thing. But when I'm working with people, we talk about bringing back agency and choice to it and noticing when you're doing it, noticing when you're stuck in a chronic state of it, and how we start pendulating and bringing, and like, that just means like bringing little moments and then culling out, little moments coming out, because there can be big moments of healing, but also for the most part, it's like these tiny little drops. It's these consistently coming back, coming back, coming back. Like when I think of mothers who talk about, I don't feel like that myself anymore, they're usually describing like, now my practitioner brain goes, you can't feel yourself.
Yeah.
You are so focused on what this baby needs from you, or what your husband wants from you, or this performance of who I should be, who I need to be. And you've lost connection to yourself. You've lost connection to that fire, that spark, that spunk, that thing in you. But here's the thing. Some of that is going to be wild and it's going to be inconvenient. And it's like, you're going to have, Brene Brown taught me this ages ago. And I don't even think she was the original one who said this, but it's like, you can't selectively numb emotion.
Yeah.
And so women often will go through lives either in this heightened state of like, you're feeling everything, right? Like I think of like the empath who's like, their empathy is blown wide open and they have no emotional, energetic boundaries. And like, as soon as their kid is having a tantrum, I'm having a tantrum, but it's not actually because I'm feeling my emotions. It's because I'm feeling their emotions in my body, and I'm over feeling them, under feeling me. I think of people who like, they're having social anxiety because as soon as they walk into a room, they're taking in everything. That can be a level of disassociation of, I'm energetically, emotionally, and my body's focus is on what's out there versus what's coming from inside the house. It's like, it's focused on how I'm performing and how I'm producing versus, is this actually what I want? Is this actually what I need? Is this coming from me, or is this the script that I'm running? So when moms are saying like, I don't feel like myself anymore, or even that like, I don't recognize me, because there's all of a sudden they're going, I don't recognize this anger. Well, that's because anger feels dangerous to so many women, right? Because they've only seen anger in this like explosive yelling way versus this like anger that is this powerful, holy thing that protects what you value more than anything. Like anger is beautiful and powerful. And so it's like disassociation is a beautiful response from your body, but we need to bring back online all of the parts of you. So like there's as a holistic self, you are not just a brain. You are a brain. You have a brain. You have thoughts. You have cognitive thoughts. The brain is also part of the body. There's like those two kind of different types about brain. There's the like unconscious, and then there's the like, I can think about what I'm thinking about. And then there's your heart, your feelings, your emotions, and then there's your gut, this knowing. I also think like when I think of the gut, I think like your spiritual self, that part of you that's connected to God, that part of you that knows something it can't have any reason for knowing, because like it is you, but so you have to have all three of those parts of you back online. But because we weren't taught how to do this, our culture is so far removed from the body. Our culture is so far removed from having any maturity or stewardship on how we build health into our emotional body, our spiritual body, our energetic, emotional self. We haven't been taught that. And by the way, we also haven't been taught shit about mental health.
Yeah.
All the conversations we have about mental health are managing crisis. They're not about actually developing skills and dynamic range of critical thinking skills and how to think when your feelings are thinking for you. Like it's wild that we don't know this. And so I'm grateful that somatics is becoming bigger, because I think it's going to give people the language and the tools to actually be able to move and transform these things instead of just talking about what the problem is, because we've done that. We've talked in circles about what the problem is, and it's not actually helping fix it.
I am mind blown by everything you just shared, because it's just something that needs to be discussed so much more. And as a women's health coach, like this is something that I have also noticed in my own journey, but also in my clients' journeys, that we don't have these specific depth of tools related to this emotional intelligence component to our wellness, and how this really can make a profound difference in how you feel day to day. So I would love for you to kind of shift more into talking about what is somatic healing, because I know that there is a person or several people listening to this that are like, you are speaking my language. This is me. I feel totally disassociated. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't feel like myself. That absolutely can relate to exactly what you're describing. So I would love for you to talk through like what actually is somatic healing, and how do you get started with trying to take steps towards implementing tools or learning how to implement this in your life.
Yeah. So somatic is, I think of it like as a very big umbrella term of embodied practices, holistic practices. And what I mean by that is that like, instead of just talking about thought and your health and well-being as like it's only mind, right? Quote unquote mental health.
Yeah.
We start talking about your whole person, your whole body, physiological, emotional, right? Like, so I'm not a doctor, but like we're working with, what does it feel like? What is the texture of it? How does it want to move? And it's not that woo-woo. I think a lot of people are freaked out by some somatic stuff, especially because like some of the things that are becoming popularized, like there's lots of different ranges of somatic. But when I think of somatic, what it is instead of just talking about the mind, it's the mind-body connection, the soma. I also describe it to people as we're working with your unconscious animal body, the things that happen without you even thinking of it. We're starting to bring awareness to the parts of you that you haven't been aware of until now. The patterns is a big part of it. So instead of thinking about fight, flight, freeze, fawn as trauma responses, which they can be, but they're also just patterns of movement.
Yeah.
Some of that was nurtured into you because of your family environment, whether you had trauma or not, by the way. Some of it is nature. It's just your human nature. There are some people who just have different natures. They're different animals. Like, we're literally animals. We are mammals. And I think we've started to think of ourselves as, I can just mind manipulate myself into doing things. But I think what's interesting is I think our culture is just now starting to see that it hasn't worked.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Because we've been doing that for a long time. And I think for a long time it did work. It's been productive. It's produced things. We've made ourselves into machines.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that like we're not machines. You can't just give me a 10-step protocol and I follow it and it works for me. I think even the personal growth and the healing world, there's been this like, here's the 10 steps. Somatics is throwing that out the window and saying, where are you?
Yeah.
Where did you come from sometimes? But like, let's start with where you are. Like, if me and you both want to go to Disneyland and you come to me and you're like, Becca, how do I get to Disneyland? And I give you the exact directions, you won't get to Disneyland because you're starting from somewhere totally different than I am.
Yeah.
So it's so fascinating to me because like on my intake forms, when clients are working with me, I can have 4 women say the exact same phrases in the exact same words. And some of them need some grit. Some of them need some muscle. Some of them need some like masculine energy. Some of them need like some boundaries and some big things to happen. And some of them need some rest.
Mm-hmm.
They need some softness. They need some like peace. They need mindset work, or they need emotional work, or they need spiritual work, or they need to shift their environment and their relationships. Those 4 women can need completely different things. So I can't just give them this roadmap and be like, here you go. There's a relationship to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for so long, I mean, you probably see this like in the eating and health world. People could give me a protocol all day long.
Yep.
But none of that addressed the fact that, oh, by the way, my emotional eating, that had nothing to do with me knowing what to eat and what not to eat. It was because food was my first friend when I was in a traumatized body. And that was the safest, easiest way for me to feel pleasure.
Yep.
That knowing this, can I just tell you the tears I cried, both of like relief and sadness for like, because I've had crazy journeys with eating and my body, obviously, because I had this body that had experienced trauma.
Right.
So it's like eating wasn't just eating to me. I had to address what was going on underneath the surface. And once I did that, it's been years of like, oh, this is easy because I shifted the pattern. I understood that when I was eating this, it wasn't just like, oh, Becca likes ice cream. It was, there's a part of me that doesn't know how to get what I need. So I reach for ice cream.
Yeah.
But that's vulnerable work.
Yeah. Vulnerable work for sure.
It's long work. It's not this quick, easy, just stop eating ice cream. And here's the thing, I could do that. I would do it for a long time and sometimes a very long time. And then all of a sudden it'd be back and I'd be like, shit, how did I get here? And I'd beat myself up. And there was all of these different patterns in my life. Like food is just an easy one to reach with because I think, especially in our culture, it's just such a big one for women, right? Like our weight and our bodies and our relationship to food. But like there is a relationship going on between you and food.
Mm-hmm.
There is a relationship going on between you and your body. There is a relationship with you and your thought life. There's a relationship going on between you and your husband, you and your kids. And it's not just happening on the surface. It's happening at an energetic level.
Yeah.
Right? A dog can tell if you're an alpha. I have a terrible beagle. Like she's the cutest thing ever, but she's like the worst. You know who she's the best beagle for? Our dog trainer.
Yeah.
The second that dog trainer shows up, my beagle is the cutest, best behaved dog you've ever seen because she knows.
Yep.
My trainer walks into the room and my dog, my beagle, can tell, oh, I have to act different now. That's happening to us. I don't care how evolved you are. I don't care how healed you are. I don't care how long you've been doing therapy or growth work. I work with therapists and coaches, and I'm constantly reminding myself and them, it doesn't matter how much healing work we do. We can't out-heal our humanity.
Yeah.
We can't outgrow the reality that like we live in this human body that was made to do this, that was made to respond to patterns, that was made to do things on its own because that's how we survive.
Yeah.
But the good news is when you learn how to relate to this, when you start bringing awareness and tools and resources and capacity, you start to learn to change the patterns because you start understanding what's actually happening underneath. Like, listen, Band-Aids, great. Band-Aids are great to stop the bleeding right away.
Mm-hmm.
You break your ankle, you probably need crutches for a little bit. But what happens when we take off the crutches? How do we bring you back into optimal functioning? There's tons of talk right now about like a regulated nervous system, but like
Mm-hmm.
what really pisses me off is it's all about being calm.
Mm-hmm.
Your nervous system isn't supposed to always be calm. It's supposed to have a wide range of regulation. It's supposed to know how to fight, flee, freeze. You want those responses built into your nervous system. What we want to do is help your nervous system understand when is there an actual threat and when is there a perceived threat that my body and my nervous system is responding to based off of a past pattern or a future expected projected pattern, right? Because that's the powerful thing about human beings is we can project into the future but feel it in the present when it's not even happening.
Yeah, it's
That's
wild.
nervous system regulation. That somatics is starting to relate to what's happening internally and is it responsive to what's happening right here and now. It's bringing you back into presence, like actually in the room. Can I feel that I'm sitting in my bedroom and that it's, let's see, what day is it? I'm like, can my body feel that it is February 27th?
Yeah.
Can I even feel that? Or can I feel that there's no one else in this room with me? That my kids aren't here, that I'm not emotionally, physiologically, emotionally responsible for my kids right in this moment?
Yeah.
A lot of women can't feel that.
Right. So good. So good. I love your story about your beagle and your dog and just picking up on energy.
Yeah.
Right. And picking up on energy and how that, that is a very relatable and real thing to us as humans. Yeah. And I'd love for you to kind of talk a little more, Becca, about, for the person that's listening to this who wants to start to implement some tools, like how do they start to really feel where they are? How do they start to take steps towards doing this work to help them get back into, really making sure they're staying in the present and they're recognizing where they are? Like, what would be simple tips, tricks, or tools you would guide someone towards?
I mean, I think one, and I love tricks and tips and tools. And two, I would say that like, I think there has to be this language of you start taking the relationship to yourself seriously.
Yep.
If your kid was struggling as bad as you would stop at hell and high water. You would not quit until you figured out how to help them. Women have struggled to do that for themselves. Even women who have like their basic self-care down, but they're avoiding those like inconvenient things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important place to start is because I think one of the things that's really powerful about somatics is it's not like, let's come in and fix you. It's recognizing like you aren't a problem to be solved. Mm-hmm. You're a person who deserves to be supported. You're a person who deserves to be able to relate to yourself. It's like, I think about, if you're in a dating relationship, do you want to be in a relationship with someone who only does things for you if it happens right away for them, if they get something from it? It's like this give to get. What if you related to yourself as if you're a person, that you are matter, that you matter? And so I think that's a fundamental place to start with, but I think a lot of women aren't there. And I think one powerful thing is starting to notice where you are. I think of presence as my brain, my energy, and my focus is in the room with me. So like even right now, Erin, it's like looking around your room being like, where am I?
Yeah.
Where location? Where am I? Like picturing zooming in and then zooming out of like, okay, I'm in my bedroom. I'm on the second story of my house. It's spring outside. It's fall spring number 2 in Colorado. But what day is it? How old am I? Where am I and what am I doing? Where am I and what am I doing? And can I bring my brain and my sensation and my energies back to me? Because so many women have this blown out energy and empathy where they're constantly thinking about everyone else. Mm-hmm. And they're not here. Like you're working, but you're thinking about your kids, and you're with your kids and you're thinking about work. And that's not this like, oh, now I need to feel shame about that. That's like, oh, can I bring myself back to here?
Yeah.
So that my energy is where I am. Because guess what? The place where I have impact and influence is where my hands are.
Yep.
Where my feet are, where my voice can reach. And like, I want to be in the room with you. I want to see you. I want to feel your energy. I want my energy to be here, because I'm sure all of us had an experience with someone where you walk away and you're like, were they even there for that?
Yeah.
You have just like this empty feeling of like,
Yep.
you can tell they're not really there.
Yeah.
You can tell that like they don't see you. They don't feel you. They're not connected to you. But they're not connected to you because they're not connected to themselves.
That's so, I love that you spoke on that, because I have absolutely felt that in relationships or in dynamics, in rooms.
Yeah.
And it's just it's hard to name it, but
Yeah.
you can very much feel it.
Yeah.
And it does very much feel like, were we really in the same place at the same time, having the same conversation and experiencing the same kind of level of feelings or whatever, when that wasn't really the connection? Like, you can very much feel the disconnection. So I love that you speak on that, because it's so real.
Your animal body can feel that.
Yeah.
Your gut instinct, when you see someone, sometimes your animal body knows things that you don't know, because it's not cognitive knowing. It's knowing it in your bones and in your body. But we haven't been taught that that's a very important part of knowing.
Yeah.
There's other types of knowing, and we need them to work together. But our culture is so distracted. Our culture is so dissociated. We've never had more information coming in at us. Like, it's insane. My animal body was not supposed to know what was happening in cultures that I don't even understand.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there's not beautiful things about like this connected world, but like, my body can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
My animal body was supposed to know what's happening in my village. My animal body was supposed to be able to be with 5 other women while I'm parenting my kids and cooking dinner. There was supposed to be 4, 5, who knows how many other adults also there, whose nervous systems were also co-regulating. And so I think it's important to name that, like, it takes effort and attention to do this, because our culture is not set up for this. Our culture is more and more and more becoming, how do we machine everything? How do we make everything faster and better and stronger? And it's making us sicker and sicker and sicker. And I think the people who see that are going, how do we come back to humanity?
Yeah. How
I'm
do we do that?
craving humanity. I'm craving having a village, but like, that can't happen online, and it can't happen from a book. It can happen online, right? Like, this is connection because we get to see each other. We get to feel each other. We can hear each other's voices. I think that's a powerful thing online. But social media, that's 2D. Your animal body is not connected to that other person. And if they are, it's a persona.
Yeah.
I don't care how authentic you are. I don't care how genuine you are. I'm very authentic online. People watching my social media, they're not sitting in the room with me having a conversation.
Right.
They're not feeling the tiny little shifts that are going to happen, even just through my day, of like the dynamic range of a human being. And so I think it's really important to name that, like, presence is hard right now because our culture is moving so fast. I mean, even me, who, like, I'm intentional about my schedule. I have a lot of like privilege in being an entrepreneur and like having a husband who works really hard to provide for us. Like, and still I look at my life, and sometimes I look around to the other moms around me and I'm like, this is too much.
Yeah.
Like,
too much.
And I'm someone who, like, I really protect our boundaries, and we're only saying yes to things that are like really good, that we really love. And it's too much for my human brain. It's literally too much expectations. And so when I'm failing, I'm literally like, oh, that makes sense. When I can't get back to people on text messages for the life of me, it's like, oh, that makes sense, because my body isn't supposed to be having this many connections with this many people. And yet, like, we have so much quantity and so little quality. I feel like I went off on a side path. Did I answer the original question?
Yes. We were talking about like, what can you really do, or where is a good starting point? Like, if you are someone who, someone who wants to get into feeling where you are or being present, like, what does that start with? And you said, like, really the basics is building the relationship with yourself and taking that seriously, and really starting to figure out, like, how can you in every given moment try to really identify, where are you? What day is it? How old are you? What are the sensations around you? What are you really doing to get your brain and your body in the same place?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love that you spoke about, Becca, was how our animal body was not built to handle the level of consumption that is around us. And
Mhm.
so many of the women that I speak to too, and it sounds like you have heard this as well, is like, we're all overwhelmed. We're all inundated. We all can't keep up. We're not good enough. And so much of that is driven by our attempt to keep up with or try to absorb and consume all the things that we're not even built to do. Like, we're not
Yeah.
even meant to do that. And so by having this level of mindfulness and awareness around this inside of our body and our brain, it gives us the opportunity to shift the lens
Yeah.
and to essentially give ourselves like 10,000 times more grace, trying to figure out, like, how do you be a human in the world we're in? And how do we continue to make sure that we're really caring for ourselves in this intentional way? And so I love that you spoke about that, because so often women are just beating themselves up constantly about the ways that they're falling short. And what we need to be doing is thinking deeper and saying, I'm not really meant or built to do all this or to manage all this or to consume all this. And I have to make sure that I'm giving myself permission to have the boundaries and be realistic about what feels good, body, brain, spirit, when it comes to just showing up in my day to day. And so I just love
Yeah.
that you spoke about that. So
And then
good.
how do we adapt?
Yeah.
How do we say, okay, I'm showing up for a lot. How do I build a robust dynamic nervous system that can handle that load?
Yeah.
Because just like going to the gym, I used to only be able to use, I remember when I first started working out, I would use like 5-pound dumbbells for like a 30-minute workout and I was exhausted. Like, I can get up to 15, 20 for reps now, which
Yeah.
like that doesn't seem like a crazy big difference. And yet at the same time, I think people underestimate that, like, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and our well-being, that's a muscle we can build.
Yeah.
And we can become stronger and stronger where things that used to feel hard become easy because we keep putting in the reps and the practice and then we never stop. It's like hygiene,
Yeah.
but we've never been taught that hygiene. We've
Yeah.
just been taught like how to perform and how to make things look good. So I think another big thing for somatics, if you're wanting to start this, is coming back to your agency and free will. And why I think that's so important is one of the big things that happens with our nervous systems is it takes over for you,
Mhm.
and you feel like you've lost choice. You feel like you've lost ability to either go or stop. Like your gas is on the brake and your foot is on the brake and the gas at the same time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that can massively help women, that seems so simple that we avoid doing it, is coming back to agency and choice. And my favorite way to do that is actually really funny. And it's thinking about, like, what do I have the free will to do right now?
Yeah.
My favorite is I could literally go get in the car right now. I could stop talking to you this very second, go get in my car, drive to Walmart, buy a cake, and eat the entire thing. Do I want to do that? No, but I could.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I work with women who are procrastinating, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Many of them have ADHD. Many of them have a lot of things going on. And they'll be like, there's so much that I can't start. And it's like, well, an object in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays at rest. And it's going to take more energy for you to start, and it's going to take more energy for you to stop.
Yeah.
So when you feel stuck, when you feel frozen, when you feel like you're too low in that activation, start wiggling your fingers and toes. Start slapping, like gently, not like meanly, feeling the muscles in your arms. Start rubbing your hands together. Go put on your shoes. Go make a drink. Go make like an iced coffee or an iced tea that like tells your body, let's wake up. Let's move a little faster. Because once you start getting into motion, it can help you. Or let's say, this is one of my favorite ones to use because I think it's common with moms, is like, I want to stop yelling at my kids. So somatically, instead of going, okay, behaviorally, let me teach you what not to do. Let me teach you, okay, stop yelling at your kids, and you're going to stop yelling at your kids for 30 days. That's not actually addressing what's happening. Why are you yelling at your kids? Because sometimes I used to yell at my kids because I didn't know how else to like get them to behave or listen. And sometimes I was yelling at my kids because I was overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
So one, it's catching yourself knowing, oh, I'm dysregulated right now. My response to this is overreacting or underreacting to what's happening in the present moment. So coming back to that, like noticing when it happened and thinking, what were my yellow and orange flags? And when I'm yelling at my kids, can I notice before I yell next time? What's happening in my body before I yell? Do I feel like a live wire and I'm overstimulated and I'm overwhelmed? Ooh, that alerts me to the need that I need to go put on my noise blocking headphones or go walk outside for a second. Are my kids behaving in a way that's like not okay? And I need to like take a minute and take a couple deep breaths and like find my feet and then address the problem. We keep trying to fix our problems behaviorally, right? We
Yeah.
keep teaching women how to behave. We've never taught them how to trust themselves and lead themselves in their behaviors
Yeah.
and how to be responsible, able to respond. And so let's say you're yelling at your kids, noticing like what's happening in your body. Where are you feeling that activation? Is it in your chest? Is it in your shoulders? And can you take a pause? Can you take a 5-second pause? If you're a people pleaser and you're like, oh, my problem, my pattern, right, is that when someone asks me something, I'm a yes girl. I automatically say yes. And then later I find like I'm over responding and I'm like giving too much. It's like you practice interrupting the pattern in a way that still feels safe. We can't go too much too fast, or you'll actually, sometimes it's like a rubber band, you'll like rubber band back even further because you brought your body out of that range of like, okay, we need to meet your edges, but usually we need to like meet it slowly, come back, meet it slowly, come back. So
Right.
you start saying, let me think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
There was a whole season of my life where I told myself, when someone asks me something, I don't answer right away. I say,
I
let me
love
think
that.
about it.
I love that so much.
And then I actually go and feel into, do I want to do this? Do I have the capacity to do this? Can I check in with myself of like what my answer really is instead of just because that pattern, again, it can be that yes. So I just described a lot of the ways that we get into somatics is like noticing our patterns of responses in relationship because most of our patterns are with ourselves or with something outside of us. Food, alcohol, caffeine, your work life, right? Like if you're a workaholic or you're procrastinating or you keep looking at your business saying, I need to show up on social media, but then you don't do it. It might not be that you don't know what to post. It might not be in your head. It might not be imposter syndrome. It might be this deep emotional pattern that's happening in your body. And how do we create a new pattern?
Yeah. That's so good. The power of the pause.
Yeah.
Like the power of the pause. Like giving yourself permission to pause.
Yeah.
Because I think we're used to like the instant gratification, is instant messaging, feeling like I have to be on, and constantly responding kind of society.
Yeah.
And we've lost our way in giving ourselves permission to say, you know what, I need to pause, or I need to give myself the space to figure out like what feels in alignment as far as my next step goes, or what feels in alignment, or how do I want to show up with this level of emotion or feeling that I'm having in the moment with my kids or my family. And I just cannot thank you enough, Becca, for your expertise, your work, your perspective, just your profound thoughts today on how to really think about what does it look like to be mind and body in the same place, and how should that feel. Like you said, so much of the mental health and emotional health discussion is around the intellectualizing and how are we like changing thought patterns, but we're not always talking about or taught how to really get into our body and how to really address that. And it's such an imperative part of really starting to work on your wellness and get into this place of really true holistic whole health. And so I just cannot thank you enough for all of your incredible knowledge today, my friend. You are amazing at the work you do. Amazing at the work you do. Before we kind of wrap up, I'd love for you in closing to kind of share, like, for the woman that's listening to this, if she feels like she really wants to start to do this work, like what would be your best starting advice for her?
Yeah. I mean, I want to answer this two different ways, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
I think there's people who like they have access to the capacity of time and finances and energy. And I would say if you have that, to invest in working with someone. I think
Yep.
so many of us are used to, I will do this on my own. But so many of our patterns and our trauma happened in relationship. And that's why having a coach or a therapist or a group community is so profoundly powerful because you're putting yourself, like we talked about with that beagle, you're putting yourself in a room of people who have the regulation that you want,
Yeah.
your body will start automatically co-regulating with them. It's wild. It's not just what you know, it's the practice, it's the relationship. So I think it's profoundly powerful to work with a coach or work with a therapist. And obviously, if people want to reach out, I love working with women, but there's a lot of really great other people out there too. Um, and if that doesn't feel accessible to you, whether that's time or financially, or maybe it just feels overwhelming, start looking up somatic podcasts,
Hmm.
start listening to some somatic podcasts. And I do say I like podcasts better than books. One, I haven't found a book that I said, like, oh, this has the magic of somatics. I think the podcast helps because you're hearing people's stories. There's a relationship to it. You're hearing the way that they share it and tell it. And so finding someone who you resonate with, and like even social media, like there are some really great accounts that share things, but I think I shy away from the social media aspect because I would encourage you, if you're wanting to start with somatics, it's not about consumption.
Right.
It's not about, let me just try to take this in and know something and fix myself. It's, what if twice a day you slow down and notice where you are and how
Mhm.
old you are? You noticed, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? Is something bothering me emotionally? Can I just take some time to acknowledge it and feel it and put my hand on my chest and put on a song and be sad for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't have to be this, like, I'm going to go dig up all my trauma.
Right.
It can be this small little acknowledgement of like, ooh, something feels really pokey today. I need to be more gentle on myself. Can I go take a walk before I go do my work? Can I put on some fancy lighting at night and like actually slow down and feel myself, feel my feelings? Can I take a little bit of time out of my day before I pick up my kids to Voxer a friend and talk about what's happening? That relationship to, you are not just a person moving through life, but like slowing down to really notice, like, you matter, you matter. And I think that's a beautiful start with somatics, is just noticing what's happening below the neck, what's happening in your heart and your lungs. And that's actually a very simple way to start. And what's crazy, that's actually where I started, Erin, of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I was having really intense anxiety, and I had all of these tricks and tools, and I would always try to think my way out of it until I understood that like anxiety wasn't just a thinking thing, it was a feeling thing. And so I started noticing, what is the sensation I feel in my body?
Right.
Oh, I feel it in my chest and it feels like I'm trying to like run through mud and it feels really tight. And sometimes I would listen to that energy and be like, ooh, I need to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to start working out every day to have a way to move that energy out of me. But I'm going to do it with the intention of connecting to that emotion, to that sensation that's in the body, not just, I need to work out to burn calories. It was
Right.
like, I need to move my body because that's how I move emotion. Emotion was meant to move us. So I know that's a really long-winded way to say it, but I also think our culture is so obsessed with like, how do I fix this quickly? And it's like, you're going to be with yourself for your whole life. This relationship isn't going away. And you can't just be picking the weeds as if you're this problem. You need to be planting flowers and watering them and nurturing them and realizing that there's going to be seasons where they grow and there's going to be seasons where things die off. And it's like, this is a long-term commitment to you. That's what
So
I would
good.
say with somatics, is it's like,
So
this
good.
is a commitment to you. Start showing up to that.
Becca, so good. So powerful and so good. And like I said, I just cannot thank you enough for your incredible knowledge and this really profound discussion about your relationship with yourself and how that really truly is the most important relationship you will ever have in your entire life. And it's been so conditioned in our society to kind of push that under the rug or to keep on powering through. And as you said, when we continue to do that, we just make ourselves feel sicker. We make ourselves feel more disconnected from who we are and how we feel. And I just cannot thank you enough for your incredible expertise today, my friend. Before we close today, will you just quickly share how people can find you online or connect with you, or if they want to learn more about working with you, et cetera, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, I'd say just you can DM on social media, especially if you just were like, oh, I love this podcast. Thank you. Like, I would just, I always love hearing feedback. I love hearing questions. I love hearing aha moments. And I know, I'm sure Erin does too.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, we'll have the links in the bio of just, there's my website, my podcast. If you want to just know, you can go creep my Instagram, but I'd love to like connect with you as a person, whether you work with me or not. Again, I'm about relationship and I don't see people as commodities. Like I
Yeah.
don't see everyone I work with like, oh, you have to work with me. It's just like, oh, you're a human. And so I love connecting with people. So Instagram is probably the easiest place, or the podcast, or obviously they can email me too, which is on my website.
Awesome, Becca. And like Becca just said, I will have everything linked up in the show notes here. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Becca, you are amazing. I am so grateful
Thank
for
you.
your time, my friend. I'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you so much.
Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.